My name is SmartAleck24, and this is No Labels Allowed. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of No Labels Allowed. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I mentioned a while back that sometimes I might just talk about something totally different compared to what I mainly focus on, and today is going to be one of those days. I was in a bit of a writing block one night and tried to come up with something to discuss, and yeah, I do have a lot of ideas lined up, but I didn't feel like doing any of them just yet. So I began coming up with some new ideas to see if maybe I would come across something that I would love to talk about, and then seemingly out of nowhere, I did come up with something that I'd love to talk about. So, without further ado, let's talk about something that people either despise or thrive on: criticism. I do want to make one thing clear before I begin. When I say criticism, I mean both destructive and constructive criticism, both of which I'll discuss. Just something to keep in mind. So, what do I think of criticism? What's the most effective way to offer criticism? Criticism is interesting for me because as a kid, I took criticism personally. If I ever got a question wrong on a test, for example, I would take it personally against the teacher. I would assume they didn't like me anymore or that I didn't know what I was doing, etc. I had horrendous reading comprehension as a kid, and when it came to reading class, I always struggled. One problem was that I wasn't taught how to improve my reading, but that's a topic for another day. Another problem was that when I would struggle to answer a question when I didn't know the answer, I took it out against the teachers. Maybe not yelling at them or anything, but I began viewing them in a negative light. It was like they were out to get me or something. To be fair, I was in elementary school, so of course my imagination and perception of the world was vastly different then compared to today. I had my intelligence going for me when I was little. I could read at a young age and was very good at math. I valued what intelligence I had, but I also knew this meant my teachers were going to push me really hard, harder than the other kids. I was by no means gifted or anything, despite what some people might say. I felt intelligence was a part of me, and that when I would get something wrong, and when a teacher would tell me I was wrong, I viewed that as an attack on my character. Obviously, it wasn't a personal attack on me. It was them telling me that I was wrong about something. I was told in 8th grade that my logic was weak. I took it personally and didn't try to improve my logic out of spite. Eventually, I grew a conscience and did, but I didn't try to improve my logic or even show interest in doing so until much later in life. It was destructive criticism with no proper advice on how to improve something I was weak at. It's pretty obvious that I didn't understand what criticism was or how to respond to it. I was never truly taught what criticism was as a kid, which I would have benefited from if they incorporated that into my education. Do I even remember the first constructive criticism that truly improved my life? Well, yeah, of course. 10th grade. I enrolled in AP World History, and oh my gosh, that was the dumbest idea I've ever had. I got a C in the class, so I didn't fail it, but I was pretty close. So what happened? Well, history is my hardest class. Trying to remember every little detail about every single time period, to me, that's impossible. I would be told by know-it-all kids that AP was easy and that the class wasn't hard. Of course, that's not helpful, but let's talk about what was helpful. My teacher assigned readings every night, and we would take short quizzes every day. We were allowed to have half a page of notes to use on the quiz, but no other help. No surprise, I failed nearly all of them. We would have to write an essay every few weeks, and I would always score really low on them because I was struggling with the material. While I struggled with the material all year, other aspects about the class began getting better. Let me explain. I finally went to my teacher during a class and said, I'm going to fail this class, I got a 0 on today's quiz, and I even took notes to study. Rather than become disappointed or just tell me to get better, she told me this: after class, let me see your notes, I want to see how you're studying. This wasn't condescending, which felt like a first for me. She was actually willing to help me. I showed her my half page of notes, which was covered in chicken scratch, and after she looked at them, she told me this: "Here's what I'm noticing," she began. "This is effort. I can tell you're trying, but you're trying to memorize facts when that's not the goal." I might have paraphrased slightly, but this is essentially what she meant. Instead of connecting all the dots and trying to understand the content as a whole, I was approaching the class incorrectly. I was trying to hopefully memorize the right facts instead of trying to understand why things happened. Why did these people do these things at these times? It didn't matter what happened. It mattered why it happened. The criticism she gave me was some of the most constructive criticism I've ever heard. She wasn't frustrated with my failings, partially due to me asking for help, and she was willing to give me the criticism that would actually help me. Too many times, and I'll get into this later, I was given criticism that was spineless. It had no backbone, and the person didn't actually mean it. But what she told me unlocked a prison in my brain that allowed me to improve. Now, mind you, I still got a C. It's not going to be an overnight fix. But I began understanding what she was meaning. I finally understood why I was failing quizzes and why I was failing papers. I wasn't always sure how to correct the problems, but I could spot them now. I'll never forget one of the papers we had to write once, easily the biggest academic accomplishment in high school for me. Would you believe me if I said I still have the paper and my results/score sheet? Here was the essay prompt. Unfree labor systems were widely used for agricultural production in the period 1450 to 1750. Discuss the major similarities and differences between two of the following systems, and then there were four systems: Caribbean slavery, North American slavery, West African slavery, and Russian serfdom. We had 40 minutes to write this essay and 5 minutes to plan out what we would write about. I vaguely remember being knowledgeable about serfdom because I found it interesting at the time, and I decided to do what I could with North American slavery. Essays were graded on a 7-point scale. The more points you got, the higher your grade. To quickly sum it up, we received 1 point each for the following: having an acceptable thesis statement, making 3 relevant and direct comparisons between or among societies, and analyzing 3 reasons for a similarity or difference identified in a direct comparison. We received 2 points each for the following: addressing all parts of the question, though not necessarily evenly or thoroughly, and substantiating the thesis with appropriate evidence. However, for the last 2, if we only did it partially, we could still get 1 point. My best essay at the time scored a 2 out of 7, but this paper scored a 5 out of 7. You're probably thinking, so that's a 5 out of 7, big whoop. But not for me. For someone constantly failing and even feeling alone in the classroom, I finally proved to myself that while it would take a ton of work, I can write a paper. I can learn something in this class. I can improve if I want to. And without constructive criticism, it never would have happened. I remember the next class where we got our papers back. I nearly jumped out of my seat. I remember gasping really loudly, and for a shy, quiet kid like myself, that's pretty rare. After that class, I went up to my teacher and simply showed her the paper she already graded. I said something along the lines of, "I'm so happy," and she responded, "I was so proud of you when I read that." That is what constructive, informative, strong criticism can do. It made me go from a crappy writer and an unknowledgeable student to someone who looked like he could hold his own. Again, I still got a C in the class, but it paid off. I graduated college in 2018 with a bachelor's in communication with a focus in journalism. That degree requires a lot of writing as well, and my papers were all praised. AP World History is a class I'd never go back to, but I got what I needed out of it. At the end of the year in AP World History, we did a mock award ceremony just for fun. She gave us all little sheets of paper with an award on it for being the best in something or whatever. Some were pretty funny. For example, one kid got an award that basically meant someone who passed the class, even though some people forgot he was in the class, and someone got class clown. Guess who got the award for most improved writer? Well, of course it was me. Who else would it have been? That was a really long story I just told, and it was only for one example of what constructive criticism can do. It can genuinely improve someone's skills. I have several examples of destructive criticism I could bring up, but I'm only going to discuss a couple. I will not name names, but someone I used to be friends with bashed my Twitch stream, saying it was all just memes and that the problems with my stream would never get fixed. I wasn't told this directly, they told another friend of mine this and then it was relayed to me, but this was very clearly destructive criticism. If they had said, Alex's stream has too many memes and they aren't fun, he should tone it down, then that would have been perfect constructive criticism. But because it was delivered as destructive, I viewed that and them negatively. I even considered making my stream have more memes out of spite. However, there comes a time where maturity needs to take the reins, so I instead just banned them from my stream and haven't spoken to them in more than a year and a half. They were also harassing a couple of my other friends, which didn't help, but I'll refrain from discussing that. My point is, because the criticism wasn't helpful and because it wasn't humble at all, I rejected it, even if they were right. And there have been times where I felt like that was the case. I would never let them have that satisfaction. I'd say my stream is doing much better today. I'm doing a much better job of just not caring about the publicity, etc., though I have slipped a couple of times. My history teacher got the satisfaction of truly helping me when I was struggling. My former friend did not have the satisfaction of fixing my stream. I want to discuss another example, but I need to set the stage real quick. I speedrun games on Twitch and I have talked with many people in the community. Technically, the speedrunning community is made up of multiple communities, and only one community I can say I have not gotten along with at all, and that is the Donkey Kong Country speedrunning community. There's a paste bin I wrote about why I quit the DKC games, and if you're curious about any of that, I'll link it in the description. In 2016, there was a DKC 2 tournament organized by the community, and I was still running the DKC games at the time, though I hated every second of it and people kept trying to convince me to join the tourney. I flip-flopped back and forth on it with a dilemma. Do I do this tournament to make everyone shut up, or do I not do it, save my sanity, and get met with backlash? I voiced my frustration on Twitter, and no matter what happened, I was met with backlash and fake advice, which I'll discuss fake advice later. You can't find these tweets anymore as I deleted that account. I made a new account a couple years later. Also, follow me at smartalex0624. Anyways, I made a comment along the lines of, I wish people would be honest and tell me what they want from me for once. And I was told by an elitist / incredibly rude person, I don't care what you do with this tourney, but you taking this so seriously is absolutely ridiculous. Let's break this criticism down. Had this rude person just said, relax, just do what you want to do and don't worry what others think about it, then that would have made me a lot more comfortable and I wouldn't have been so distraught. But instead, the criticism over what I take seriously pushed me over the edge. Needless to say, I was not happy. This person has been blocked on Twitter and banned in my Twitch streams. Destructive criticism only serves to, well, destroy. If it was constructive, maybe we would have gotten along better. Maybe not see eye to eye on everything, but we would still have a mutual respect for each other. But that's not the case. Unfortunately, it seems the person has learned nothing about properly offering criticism since then, and this incident wasn't the first time they were rude. When I would put myself down or act self-condemning, they told me, "Can you not be despondent when having an off day?" Consider this. If I was at the lowest point of my life, and I was being despondent, as you claim, would you make this comment? This was said to me when I was mentally unwell, which is a topic for a different episode. Imagine if I became suicidal over this. The more you push people away, the more incidents like this can happen. Think about this next time you think you're holier than thou. I feel my point might have gotten lost there, so let me explain. By giving people advice that isn't actually helpful and only serves to show how annoyed you are making yourself look ignorant, rude, and fake. If you want to be known as this, then by all means keep doing it. But I wouldn't do this. Ironically, the person who made these comments deals with mental health issues like myself, so you would think that they would understand where I'm coming from, but no. Also, I've been taking my mental health seriously, and I genuinely am better today. I don't think the other person can say the same. Admittedly, I don't have a transition to my next point, so let's just jump into it. I want to discuss fake advice, or what my therapist prefers to call it, false reassurance. If you don't have criticism or advice, don't say anything. Don't try to come up with something that might appease the person, because you'll only be as bad as the person who gives destructive criticism. Let me offer some examples I've heard in my life that truly grind my gears. When I would get picked on by my brothers at a young age, I would ask my parents to tell them to stop. Instead, they would just tell me, just ignore it and it won't bother you. Except for one thing, it's not that simple. You're not solving the problem of my brothers constantly trying to make me break. You're not solving the problem of my siblings making fun of me in front of other people. You're not fixing anything. You're giving me false reassurance that everything will be okay as long as I just ignore it. Nowadays, I ignore comments such as "you're ugly" because I genuinely don't care. But when it gets personal, I don't ignore it, because then it makes it seem like the other person's comments are okay. I'll bring up a more recent example of false reassurance / fake advice. When I was struggling to get new people involved in my Twitch stream, I was struggling to figure out why. Streaming wasn't fun since no one was chatting or hanging out. I was then told that as long as you're enjoying what you're doing, that means it was a great stream. Nope, that's fake advice. You don't get to decide if a stream of mine was great if I was doing something I enjoy. I like playing certain games, but when it doesn't go well one night or when I struggle to play well, you don't get to say that the stream was great because I was doing something I wanted to. You can't tell me how to view my stream. And this was a big issue I had. This advice had no backbone. There was no substance to this. People who give false reassurance like this, instead of offering valid criticism or trying to understand the person to form a true opinion, are just feeding their ego. If you don't have actual criticism or advice, saying something in the hopes that the person will change overnight is much more insulting than destructive criticism to me. Now, to be fair, my stream definitely feels better today because I am doing what I want to do. But this is not in part to this person's, or really these people's, false reassurance. It was because I made the change myself. I decided that having fun was more important than trying to improve. In fact, talking with my sister about my stream one night made much more of an impact than someone's fake advice that could have just not been said. If someone was struggling with anxiety, would you just say, "Oh, just don't worry about it, everything will be okay"? Or would you actually try to understand the person and offer meaningful, impactful advice? Would you offer criticism in the way they think and try to offer a solution for how to improve or fix it? Or is the cliche, "everything will be fine, stop worrying," a better explanation in your mind? My point is this. Your destructive criticism matters. If you use destructive criticism, you're just pushing people away and they will never get along with you. People will spite you for it. People will mock you for it. People will never see eye to eye with you if you don't truly try to understand where someone is coming from. Your lack of criticism is okay. Just don't try to whip up something to make yourself look helpful. Be honest. Simply say, "I don't have any advice or criticism, but I'm here for you and I'm willing to listen." You will be a lot more welcoming in their eyes. Your constructive criticism is monumental. Because my teacher was willing to help me in high school and critique my studying tendencies, I was able to improve my studying, my thoughts, and my writing. I've even had criticism regarding my podcast. But here's the thing. It was constructive. They said, "You sound nervous, but it makes sense because you're just beginning. Also, these episodes are a bit short." Not destructive. It was delivered in a manner where they were truly trying to understand why the podcast was the way it was. 6 episodes later, and not only is this the longest episode so far, but I think I sound a lot more relaxed now. If the criticism was, "This podcast sucks, there's no point in you doing this, go play Donkey Kong Country," then this episode wouldn't have existed. We couldn't have discussed the concept of criticism and how it truly does affect people either negatively or positively. To sum it up, I can only be better with meaningful and constructive criticism. Any other kind of criticism might as well just be silence. I think I've said everything I can regarding this. I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you either learned something or at least formed your own opinions about this topic. As I said before, I'm on Twitter, I have a Discord server, I upload these to YouTube and Buzzsprout. If you want to continue this discussion, feel free to reach out to me. Just be mindful of your criticism. That concludes episode 6 of No Labels Allowed. Thank you all for tuning in, stay safe, and take care.